Today on the show, we're rounding up some headlines that caught our attention. And this week, we're focusing on the 3 big housing stories that directly affect our city's houseless community. Joining me today is the Oregonian's Nicole Hayden, who reports on homelessness, and our very own lead producer, John Notariani. It's Friday, February 10th, 2023. I'm Claudia Meza, and this is CityCast Portland. Nicole, thanks for joining us. I wanted to start off the conversation with one of your stories. You recently went to LA to see how the camps they built down there were doing. They were built by Urban Alchemy, and they are going to possibly be the organization that is going to put up the very controversial tent encampments that Mayor Ted Wheeler and Commissioner Dan Ryan have proposed. Tell us what you saw. Let's start with the positives. Like what was working down there?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing that was working is that people felt safe for the first time in a long time. You know, folks who were living completely unsheltered in tents, or maybe not even having a tent, just sleeping in a sleeping bag. This was an opportunity for them to live in a gated, protected area where they got their basic needs met. So, you know, they got food. They got a larger tent than you normally see folks camping in if they're living on the street. And they got supports day to day. So people that I talked to that were living there really expressed gratitude for not having to worry about the violence that comes with sleeping on the street. They could sleep through the night. Now, as far as things that people express negativity towards, or things critics said need to be thought about further, were the fact that these are just tents as opposed to, you know, like a tiny home structure. So the federal government doesn't even consider these as adequate shelter.
Yeah, so they don't fund it, right? We won't be available for any kind of earmarked funds for these types of programs, is what I'm understanding.
Correct. So usually you can capture some HUD funding for shelter, and these won't qualify. With that said, there's of course other funding that could work.
Yeah, but didn't Mayor Ted Wheeler ask the county, and they were like, no,
Correct.
we will not be funding any of these until we see one working. And so I thought it was funny that he went from, we're going to open up 6 of these to like, we are opening up 1. Is that just an assumption on my end, or is that what happened?
So the city still plans to fund their whole project, but
Okay.
at the same time, they're doing one at a time and going slowly. Mostly that's just how things go, because it takes a while to build things, and they're kind of wanting to test the waters first before they all of a sudden build a bunch of these throughout the city.
Yeah. I'd love to continue hearing more bad news about the Urban Alchemy.
Okay. Yeah, so even in LA, which is obviously much more sunny and warm than here, folks were telling me that, you know, they kind of had to strategize to keep their things dry and themselves dry in the tents.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask, how big are these? The tent village in LA, like how big is it compared to what we're proposing here in Portland?
Yeah, it's pretty similar. So they have 95 tents, and we plan to have about 100 tents, but can make room for up to 150 people. You know, so that means like if couples want to room together in a tent, they can. So it would be a pretty similar size to what I saw in LA.
Yeah, I'm curious because I'm just wondering about the cost per camper, right? Because in your article, you said that they're spending $3 million annually on this. And I'm wondering how expensive this is per person compared to what it would cost to get someone into more permanent housing. Like, do the numbers add up?
Yeah, so that's what a lot of readers who are emailing me after the story were saying, I got all of these
Mm.
readers doing math equations in my email.
Sorry. I want you to know that I feel your pain. And you go on.
Yeah, so here, Urban Alchemy said in their bid that it would cost about $5 million to run this site. And yeah, we could house people for that cost. It's a hard conversation to have because, as we know, housing is what ends homelessness. But we also know that we have a lack of housing units, and even folks who got approved for a housing voucher are still waiting because they can't find an apartment. So there is a backlog, and we do need to figure out where people can safely stay. And yeah, it will be expensive, but it does seem like these projects are quite expensive. Maybe part of that is the staffing. Um, they do commit to having like one staff member to 15 campers ratio.
And they provide services, right? Like
Yeah,
there's actual, mental health services. There's food. I remember reading someone saying I can eat whenever I want, which is a big deal for these
that is.
Yeah,
shelters. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when we provide food to people, typically, like they have to, maybe make it across town. And if they miss it, they're hungry until maybe the next dinner offering. So the fact that they can come and go as they please, they can get food whenever they want, means they can find jobs and whatnot, not have to worry about kind of fitting their life into these certain parameters. They can kind of just live as they would. So, yeah, that is a big deal.
I really want to jump into the company itself, Urban Alchemy, which has mainly made these encampments in California, and they have a rep. I mean, I'm just gonna fast forward ahead and give you a big spoiler on this if you have not read Nicole's excellent article. But they're banned from making any more encampments in Sausalito. And Nicole, can you explain what's going on there?
Yeah, so that came from a lawsuit filed by folks living in a temporary encampment in Sausalito that the city created after they kind of kicked folks out of another area, and then they hired Urban Alchemy to run it. Issues arose when workers were bringing in meth into the site and
Workers.
doing meth. Yeah,
Ugh.
workers. Yeah. Um, and giving it to the
John's
campers.
disgusted. I'm sorry. I just want to make sure that
I
everyone
mean,
knows.
come on.
John just went,
That
ugh.
that that is not okay.
It's not. It's not.
So it was that issue coupled with a woman reported that she was sexually assaulted by a worker. And so the Urban Alchemy contract with the city of Sausalito was about to expire anyways. But a federal judge came in and said, yeah, once this expires in the next couple of weeks, you can't set up another contract. And then there were other lawsuits that some of them have just been dismissed or settled that workers employed by Urban Alchemy were saying they felt like the working conditions were not fair, that they weren't getting paid enough, and that they weren't getting enough training. That's concerning because we know de escalation and being able to address mental health issues is something that really matters when you're working with a big encampment.
So even with all of these issues, why is Portland moving forward with Urban Alchemy? Or they haven't announced it. Sorry, they haven't announced it. But why is it possible that this might be it?
Yeah, a lot of cities across the West Coast are really interested in this model right now because they see it as a quicker, cheaper model. And it does get people off the street, which provides safety. But a lot of critics are saying that they feel like this response is to remove people off the street. So, folks don't have to look at people who are homeless and that it can clean up business neighborhoods. And I think the city really wants to do something big to show that they're trying. But I think the biggest issue that maybe we haven't discussed as much is that when Urban Alchemy was asked like how they will make these tents safe for Portland, um, their response was that, well, people have survived in tents this long in Portland. We think they'll be able to figure out how to survive in tents here in terms of how to make it through like cold winters.
Um, I'd love to talk about the Sunderland RV Safe Park that is opening. There's been this effort to get these safe rest villages going. They're a lot smaller than the sort of mega camps that Wheeler has proposed, but it's taken forever for the city to get these going. What has the timeline looked like?
Yeah, we were promised that these would be open at the end of 2021. Now we are in 2023, and we have just announced the RV site, the third Safe Rest Village under Commissioner Dan Ryan's Safe Rest Village plan, but this will be the only RV site. We don't have an opening date because it took a while to find a nonprofit to agree to run it because no one has
Hmm.
run an RV site here yet. And so it was a lot to ask, our nonprofits running on slim budgets to take on. But yeah, it allows people to stay where they feel safe in their RV and come and get services rather than, being parking on the side of the street, risking being towed or any other issue that comes with parking where you're not necessarily allowed to per city code.
This is 2 year, we're running 2 years behind schedule on these smaller sites. And I'm just bracing for what that's going to mean for these mega sites, that are much, much bigger that the city is hoping to get going in the next couple years too. I find it hard to believe that the city is going to be able to suddenly get those things online when these smaller ones have just been struck by so many logistical delays.
Yeah, no, that's a big critique, something that folks keep bringing up. The LA site I visited was built in 6 months, but trying to get as many of those tent sites built as the city is envisioning, yeah, seems like it could take a long time given their record of building shelter sites.
Why do you think it's been difficult for these sites to find partners? Well, specifically the Safe Rest Village sites.
Yeah, a lot of our nonprofits are really skilled at what they do, but running safe rest villages was just not something in their wheelhouse. Uh, and so that was asking them to take on a lot more work with not a lot of funding, and it just really stretches their staff thin. So we had some, initial partners for there were three temporary sites set up during the pandemic, and eventually those partners kind of left and the city had to find new partners. And it's a lot of work because you have to be on site, physically on site. You're not just like checking in on people here and there. So I think it's just a logistics challenge.
Yeah. Okay, let's take a break here. When we come back, more on the three big housing stories of the week with Oregonian reporter Nicole Hayden. Well, we've just talked about Mayor Ted Wheeler's and Commissioner Dan Ryan's plans for more immediate housing, which doesn't feel very immediate. But, when you're working with that much money, people are just like, what are you going to do? Tell me every single thing that's going to happen here.
Right.
And that's the way it
Mhm.
should be. There should be that transparency. But let's talk about the other housing plan that actually puts people in houses. John, do you want to tell us what this is all about?
This is super interesting to me, and like kind of caught me off guard. Last Friday, Multnomah County Chair Jessica Vega Peterson put out a $14 million plan to house 300 homeless Portlanders around the central city within a year. Looking at these sort of longer term plans that the city itself has been proposing, and then the new county chair is just like, I've got this plan and we're going to get it done within a year. There's a guarantee to landlords that house the people that they'll get paid rent. I'm curious to see how it's going to be implemented and if it's going to work, though. Nicole, what's your read on this plan?
Also, is it a new plan? Is it a new plan, though?
It's
Nicole, would you consider this a brand new plan?
I would consider it an extension
Okay.
of a prior plan. So,
All right.
Sure.
but yeah, I think we saw last year when former Chair Deborah Kafori rolled out the Move in Multnomah program, which this plan is based off of. we saw a lot of success. They were able to quickly house folks because a big barrier to getting people housed is finding apartments. You can usually get people a voucher, but once they get the voucher, uh, they have to still navigate, landlords telling them no because of their record or maybe a prior eviction. And caseworkers really have to finesse that relationship. So being able to offer all these incentives to landlords really brought more people to the table offering up apartment units that maybe wouldn't have considered this before. And so this past summer, we saw people getting housed within like weeks instead of months and sometimes years. Like people were moving in within like 2 weeks, which is crazy. And so,
That's really fast.
yeah, so that was a pilot program, and they used up the money and the money ran out. And so this program kind of tries to build on that and making it bigger and giving it more sustainable funding to see if we can do this at scale. And so the first part of the program, like you said, is focused on the downtown Old Town, uh, Central City area, and they want to house 300 people in 4 months. And then from there, kind of expand to the east side of the county and then eventually expand to the full county. And I think we could see a lot of success. I think the one thing we have to consider, though, is that the population what we are focusing on to house in downtown is a hard population to house. The biggest challenge for any county or housing authority is targeting folks who need mental health care, substance use care, and kind of helping them get acclimated to living inside, maybe after living outside for decades or more. So I think it'll be interesting to see how quickly and how effective it is in downtown.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the plan does say that there are going to be people that they're hiring to coordinate services for these people as well. And it sounds like those people are going to have a huge amount of culpability for whether this succeeds or fails, right? Like I'm just imagining that those people that are in a support role are going to be so vital to the success of this project.
Definitely, yeah. Caseworkers really, they can make or break a situation, and we know we need more caseworkers. Pay caseworkers more. Some caseworkers I've talked to have to dip into the programs that the organization they work for offers because they get paid so little. So,
Mm.
yeah, as long as we support the people supporting the folks who are getting housed, it could be a great recipe.
I had a question. So we just talked about, the emergency, tent encampments. I'm calling them emergency because no way someone is going to live in this encampment for longer than 6 months in my head, in a perfect world. And then there's the safe rest villages, which is almost like intermediary. Like, yes, now there's a roof over your head, or now you have something more stable that's not a tent. And then there's this plan, which is just like, here's a house. But I feel like all three look like these perfect transitional points if they were working together, especially like you hit it, Nicole. Like, you can't just give someone who's been living on the streets for a decade keys and just be like, here, you success and off with you. There's a lot of
Right.
things that need to happen. Is it just like three different plans going off at the same time, or is there any coordination? Do you know anything about what's happening there?
Yeah, all of these are supposed to be coordinating together. So it'll be interesting in the next year to see how effectively they do that. But in Vega Peterson's plan, she did mention the city's new tent sites as places to kind of let people stay while they work on moving them into housing. Because even immediate housing could still mean a few weeks or a month. So she hopes that these other things that the city is offering can be um, kind of the middle ground. So, and also the state is kind of requiring these coordinated plans in order for agencies to get the money. So there's an expectation on many levels that all of these different players are working together seamlessly. We know that's a challenge, but in a perfect world, they would all, yeah, work in unison.
So, well, this is the part of the roundtable, Nicole, where we each talk about one headline that caught our attention, and we're calling it our lightning round. John, do you want to start us off?
So for something completely different, I want to talk about the $150 cup of coffee.
What? What?
So for anybody who didn't catch this, there's this coffee company, Proud Mary. They're based in Australia, but they have an outpost on Alberta in Portland. And a couple of weeks ago, they said they were going to start selling cups of coffee that cost $150 each. They come from this really rare coffee bean from Panama that costs $2,000 a pound. And they said in their shop, they're going to be selling 11 cups of this $150 per cup of coffee. And they completely sold out. And the thing that I thought was really interesting was who they said who bought it. They said some regulars came in, some like real coffee nerds came in to spend $150 on a cup of coffee. But then there was a couple people who were just like at the cafe that day and like impulse bought a $150 cup of coffee. They were like getting a scone and then were like, yeah, I'll spend $150 on a cup of coffee. Yeah, why not? So
you know they were getting a scone and they probably had 3 Bloody Marys. And then they're just like, this
Yeah,
is like
3
a
Bloody
great
Marys.
idea.
But yeah, it is now sold out, unfortunately.
Oh,
if
that's
you want
too
to find...
bad.
Yeah, I know you really wanted one, Claudia.
Nicole, would you throw down $150 for what essentially is a pour over, right? Because that's what they specialize in.
They said it has the potential to taste like bubble gum or Fruit Loops.
I don't know.
That doesn't seem like I would want to pay $150 to drink coffee that tastes like bubble gum.
Yeah, I don't think my palate's refined enough. I'd just be like, cool coffee. That's a fun story. Nicole, do you have anything that distracted you from housing?
Yeah, I saw that Oregon was rated as the least romantic state in America.
Oh,
and I was just wondering what your thoughts were on that. Have you felt this has been less romantic than other places that you guys have lived?
Wow, that's a really good question.
I think Oregon's kind of romantic. I think that like drippy, rainy weather can be like kind of cute. I don't know. Seems more romantic. I mean, yeah, there's like these gorgeous outdoor areas. That's super romantic.
How are we less romantic than like Las Vegas or I don't know, just any
like South Dakota.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm getting so defensive. Yeah, that's so interesting.
Rainy weather leads to, staying inside and cuddling. I just feel like you could really foster some romance here.
Yeah, and in this, like, have you been to our coast?
Right.
Do you think we're goths? Do you think that, like, deep down inside, no matter what we do in our lives, we have a little goth in us, and we're just like, this is beautiful, and it's just like.
But that's super romantic. Goths are like the most romantic people.
I would agree with that.
Sorry, everyone who's listening. You're a goth. You live here, and that's you're probably blasting The Cure, looking outside contemplatively with a hand pressed against a window.
I have actually listened to The Cure this week. Full disclosure.
Wow. Whose study was this? I'm always just curious because I feel like we always come up in these studies and just like, I'm sorry, what website now?
Yeah, I've never heard of this website. It's called bookies.com, but one of our reporters at the Oregonian rewrote the story. So
they're like, place your bets, but not on Oregon because it's really, we are not going to get anyone there. No one's ready for romance. Oh, that's so funny. Okay, well, my story is actually something I saw from the Oregonian TikTok, Nicole, so you probably already know what I'm going to talk about. But this weekend, a video went viral, and not much information at first was given. It was just like you saw this yacht, and it got rolled over by a huge wave, and it was at the mouth of the Columbia River. So I'm sure anyone who does sail or whatever, they're like, what the hell are they doing? It's terrible. Why would you cross the sandbar now? Because that is when the river meets the Pacific Ocean, that specific area is called the graveyard of the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah,
It
it's
is
super dangerous.
So I mean, I think it might be considered one of the most dangerous connections to the ocean in the world.
I'm having to resist myself from jumping in on this story because I love it so
my
much.
God. No. You want to go back and forth?
No,
do you want to
this is all
do you want to hype man me? You just
it's like rewatching a movie that you love.
You're just
I want to experience it again.
so then it comes out that so this guy who's Canadian, Jericho Labonte, I believe that's his name. He stole that yacht. It was $160,000 and he stole that yacht. And the best part is that he went to the hospital totally okay, gave a fake name, walked away. And then everybody was like, hold on a second, that's not your yacht. And on top of that, aren't you the guy that left a dead fish in the Goonies house? And you're just like, wait, what? And he was wanted for that. And then on top of that, the Canadian police was like, can we have him? He has a ton of warrants for just general mischief. And I'm like, if anyone just was the walking image of mischief, it'd be this guy. In 48 hours, he caused so much chaos. And so many people could have died. Jericho Labonte, including himself. He could have died. That Coast Guard.
Jericho's living his best life, for sure.
Oh, no. I don't know, Nicole. Do you think that's the best life?
For Jericho.
I just hope it gets turned into a movie so we can all experience it over and over.
The Goonies sequel we all need.
Great. Well, Nicole, thanks so much for coming on the show. We really enjoy your reporting. Thank you for doing what you do. It's important to get these specific stories out and have so much transparency around it.
Thanks for having me. I enjoyed chatting. This was fun.
Well, that's all for today here on CityCast Portland. Our lead producer is John Notariani. Our audio producer is Julia Fiaioni. Our newsletter editor is Rachel Monahan. And our host is me, Claudia Meza. Original music by Jenny Conley and Steven Drizos. Additional music by Epidemic Sound. We'll be back next week with more conversations from around the city. Until then, see you at Slim's.